Today I want to help you craft the best open field roster possible for your archers. Whether you're free to play or pay to win, what are the best archer combos that you can use? Whether you're bringing 1, 2, 3, or even 4 archer marches in the open field. And we'll even dig deep into the roster, talking about which commanders are still super relevant, like, of course, Chisgule Liang and Boudica Prime, and which commanders you could use if you had them, like Ramses and Cyrus, even though they aren't great investments for new sculptures to go into today. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And I put a tremendous amount of thought and study into what are the best open field marches in the game. This guidance comes not only from my playing in endgame KVKs, but also observing what other people are using in the KVKs that I'm battling in and other KVKs as well. So in this video, I want to give you what the best pairs are and a review of all the archer commanders to talk about which ones are still really top tier and which ones you certainly shouldn't put sculptures into starting in 2023. Now, if this is the kind of guidance you're into, consider subscribing to the channel for those daily Rise of Kingdoms videos designed to help you get value and smash your enemies. Let's start with just a quick review of the building blocks, the commanders that I think are really top tier considerations for the open field. This, of course, is going to include Chisgule Liang, who is an absolute monster and is arguably one of the best commanders in the game right now. He does massive damage and a massive debuff, but misses out on march speed. Very powerful, must include. Another must include is, of course, going to be Boudica Prime. She is absolutely insane. And although she's like, I don't know, 10 months old at the time of this recording, she's still really top tier. In addition, and let me just filter by archers over here, we've got to get a look at commanders like Isong as still being very relevant and very powerful. We've got to get a look at Nebu, very relevant, very powerful, both of them big area of effect damage. We also need to talk about a commander I haven't even maxed, which is Henry, who's really great for rallying, but still being used as a strong open field commander. Even though he doesn't do area of effect damage, the rest of his kit is honestly amazing. And a couple other commanders that round things out. You've also got Artemisia, who is a building block we can use here because she pairs so well with Boudica Prime. And I don't want anyone to be confused. She's only really good because you can pair her with Boudica Prime, and she basically leverages this sort of shrug off of a silence from Boudica Prime. So Artemisia silences herself, but boosts your damage by 50%, which is insane. But Boudica Prime can shrug off the silence. So the combination of these two is really powerful, and that's really the only place, in my opinion, for Artemisia these days in a meta murder ball. And what's so insane about Artemisia and why she's still honestly a great invest today is that you can take her to 5, 5, 1, 1. And if you're bringing many archer marches, you still are getting the overwhelming majority of what her kit does. Now, if you're bringing just one march to the field, I'll talk about why she isn't the pick, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But she's a building block that we'll be using as a part of top tier pairings. In addition, we do have one non-archer commander that does make it as a solid building block, and that is, of course, going to be Honda Tadakatsu in the leadership category of commanders. And Honda's secondary is extremely versatile. I will make the argument that also Mehmed is extremely versatile, but in this instance, a part of the reason I really like Honda as one of our building blocks today is that he has march speed, whereas Mehmed does not. Now, this brings us to the other building blocks, the commanders that are good, and we'll talk about them, but you wouldn't go out of your way to max them today. And that includes commanders like Cyrus, who unfortunately just doesn't do enough damage on his active skill, even though all of his skills are relevant in the open field. And by the way, this is an open field list, right? We'll talk about Gilgamesh a little bit, who has a really great debuff from his blood craving, punishing anyone that heals and also making the target take more skill damage. However, in a meta murder ball, his active skill is very weak because the health reduction effect is duplicative with Skippy Prime, and your murder ball does have Skippy Prime, right? So you can only have one of those effects that applied at a time, and Obviously, the Skippy Prime is a better pickup than your Gilgamesh. Similarly, Ramses falls into that same boat. He is really solid overall, great skill damage mitigation, but the problem with Ramses is that he has no base march speed. He only has triggered march speed when you're being attacked, and he has a defense reduction effect, which is duplicative with better commanders. XY is a better commander that does AoE defense reduction, and Nevsky is a way better commander that does even better single target defense reduction. So Ramses gets good results in the field, but is, in my opinion, not a great invest right now. One other tech-based play that I'm going to mention now, but we won't really talk about for the sort of rest of the video is Tommy. Tommy you bring in if you're going to swarm garrisons and you're a whale. If you're not a whale, don't worry about Tommy. And lastly is going to be a tech play that I think is better than people give credit, and that's Julius Caesar. And with the museum buffs, you could double relic Julius Caesar, and he's doing a lot of all damage and march speed. I actually think people are sleeping on how well he would perform with a bunch of archers. Okay, now we can talk about a few commanders that are just benched, and I think they stay on the bench. That includes El Cid. That includes Edward of Woodstock, who, I mean, he's just not doing enough. People have tried and tried and tried, but his active skill is just not nearly enough damage anymore. And the downside of having a higher rage requirement is just really miserable for open field fighting. Thutmose also falls into that list of subpar commanders that you wouldn't use in the end game. And one other commander that might surprise you is Amani. And she just doesn't do enough. She doesn't have any march speed. She doesn't have any tanky stats. She's a pure glass cannon, and she's not even all that great at it. So Amani is pretty much benched, in my opinion, for open fielding. There may be some people who try to use her, but I just don't think she's all that great. So this brings us to the open field pairings. And to get a better look at this, I'm going to take this into Tier Maker so we can visualize all the pairings together. Okay, let's craft the best archer pairs in Rise of Kingdoms. And there is one obvious, dominant, best archer pair. If you're bringing only one archer march, this is it. And it's going to be Boudica Prime with Zhuge Liang. Boom. Obviously. Easy choice. The best open field archers. Smash them together, and there you go. The reason you put them in this order is that Boudica Prime will increase the skill damage taken by the target, and then Zhuge Liang does big area of effect damage, including the target that you just made take more skill damage. So very easy to understand why this pair works so well. Both of them can shrug off debuffs, and when they shrug off debuffs, they damage the enemy. Super, super powerful combo. So I don't even think there's much we need to talk about here because it's so powerful. The only thing I will say is that there's a lot of people who are like, hey, bro, I don't have Boudica. I do have an E-Song. Can I run Zhuge Liang with E-Song and make this my one pair? And if you only run one Archer March, I think you can do this. It will do good damage, but it will be severely lacking in March speed. And that needs to be your main consideration and optimization. You need to look to accessories to get March speed. You could use the blue flag to get like 5%, or you talent it and it's like, what, 6.5%, something like that, 7%. You got to do whatever you can to put some March speed onto this dang thing because it is a sitting duck. And that is the problem. Great damage, but super vulnerable to just getting targeted and wrecked. Okay. So if we go back to that one best pair, which is going to be our Boudica Prime with Zhuge Liang in that order, what happens if you want to make two pairs? And if you look at what the number one kill player got in our last KVK, they pulled down 7 billion kill points. The second march that they used was Henry with Nebu. Easy to see why they might do this. You basically keep your best archer pairing, and then boom, you bring in the Henry with the Nebu. Now, a lot of people don't have Henry, and that includes me. I don't have Henry. So what's another way that you could run this? Well, if Henry is not available to you, the other way you could run this is you could bring in your E-Song, and rather than run Nebu with E-Song, I think at this point I would try to split the Boudica and the Zhuge Liang. So I would probably run it like this: Boudica E-Song, and then Zhuge Liang with Nebu. And that gives both combos March speed, and you may be thinking like, but Chisgule, why run Zhuge Liang as the primary? That is because although with the Boudica Prime combo, you get this really nice synergy of making the target take more skill damage and then dealing skill damage to them with Zhuge Liang. What I'd rather do with this Nebu combo is apply the area of effect damage delta debuff from Zhuge Liang immediately, as fast as I can. So I want him as the primary, and that's why. So we run it in that order, and I think this is probably a great way to go. Now, I will remind you, other options you could do here as your Boudica combo could be Boudica with Artemisia. You could do Boudica with Honda. I played around with that in the last KVK, and it did great for me. Okay, if you had Cyrus, you could consider doing Cyrus. There's a lot of ways that you could run that Boudica combo. She's super versatile and very powerful. But if you're doing 2 pairs without Henry, I feel like this is probably your best bet. With, again, one consideration for like a truly equivalent pair, I do Boudica with Artemisia. I find it to be more tanky, but deal almost as much damage. And I know it's not exactly true that it's an equal amount of damage, but I really like that combo just like that. So from here, what do we do if we go to 3 pairs? And you could be doing 3 pairs, I suppose. If you have 6 or 7 marches in your ball, you could go to 3 pairs of archers. But I just want to mention that, in my opinion, and I covered this in a previous video, card will be up in the top, I think the meta player, if you go all the way to 7 marches, is going to use 2 archer marches, 2 cavalry marches, 2 infantry marches, and a leadership march. So with that said, you could go to 3, but I don't know that I'd recommend it. But what would I do if I was going to 3? Well, I like bringing in the Boudica with Artemisia combo. And I would hope that perhaps if you're going to 3, you have Henry available. Because if you're going to bring in Henry, I think what you do is Zhuge Liang with Nebu, and then Henry with Isong. And Henry with Isong does a lot of damage, has a moderate amount of march speed from Henry, and has good tankiness from the support tree and from Henry's active skill. And I think this is the way that you run 3 marches. Now, of course, you have a lot of options here as well. As I've mentioned in the past, Cyrus is an option, as is Honda Tadakatsu. Very versatile, very flexible. You could move them around as you saw fit across these different combos. But I would probably keep the Zhuge Liang and the Nebu together. That to me just feels like a lot of area of effect damage and good march speed and good tankiness. So I wouldn't change around that combo. And if you have the Artemisia, Boudica is the only place for that. So the sort of Cyrus and the Honda combo, you could swing around to different places. But the thing that I like about the Henry with Isong is that it's a lot of tankiness from Henry with a lot of glass cannon damage from the Isong. And that sort of pairing makes a lot of sense. Now, let's say you don't have the Henry, which I don't, and I know a lot of people don't. So how else would you swing it if you wanted to run 3 archer marches? Well, with no Henry, I think you definitely use Boudica Artemisia. And now we've got to fall back on some sort of tried and true combos. At this point, I think you do Nebu with Isong. And then you do Zhuge Liang with Honda Tadakatsu. And that gives you a split of march speed across all these marches. They are roughly equivalent in terms of how fast they go. Turns out, in this case, the Boudica is probably your slowest march. And that's probably the best way you could do it. Alternatively, if you wanted to bench the Isong to get more tankiness, you could do a swap in over here. So you bench the Isong, you do Nebu with Honda, which I have done and found to be way better than the Nebu with Isong. It's just more tanky, and I get targeted a lot, so that worked out really well for me. And then you could swap in something like Gilgamesh. You could swap in something like Cyrus. Gilgamesh doesn't have any march speed, though, so that's kind of a rip. Maybe I wouldn't do that. The Cyrus might be the play, honestly. It's got the march speed. It's got solid damage. A little bit glass cannon, quite frankly. But I think the Zhuge Liang with Cyrus would be okay. And that's probably how I would run 3 combos, no Henry. And again, I do like the Isong in here. I do like the Honda over here. That's probably the better play. But you got a bunch of ways you could do it. Now, from here, we get to 4 pairs. And I'm going to stop saying, well, what do you do if you don't have Henry? Because, like, if you're doing 4 pairs of archers, I don't know what you're doing if you don't have Henry. You probably should have him at this point. And if you do that, I'm going to say that you go Boudica with Artemisia. We're going to bring in Henry as a primary commander and pair with Isong. From there, I'm going to put Zhuge Liang with Cyrus. As I mentioned, a little glass cannon, but you're making so many pairs. Like, what are you going to do? And then from there, we do Nebu with Honda. You could also do Gilgamesh or Ramses over here. And the reason that I think you could do Gilgamesh or Ramses in this particular combo as an alternative is that Nebu's got area of effect damage already and march speed. So it's okay to move back to single target damage with no march speed, which is what would happen if you use Gilga or you use Ramses. And Ramses kind of has afterburners. Like if he gets targeted, he can kick on some extra march speed, which is nice. So you could use that as your escape mechanism or vehicle, I suppose, if you wanted to. Now, I do have a couple other commanders here on the bench in the roster, right? Like, I just haven't tested with the Caesar double relic to prove how it does, but the double relic Caesar might actually work up here with Nebu. It might actually work with Zhuge Liang. I just don't know. Haven't played around with it enough, but it could actually be fine. Mehmed is in the roster, but currently not deployed because he doesn't have any march speed. So you could do like Boudica with Mehmed, for example, and I think it would be okay. I don't think it would be amazing. You could do Nebu with Mehmed instead of a Honda. It would be okay. I don't think it'd be amazing, but it might be fine. I just haven't tested with it enough, but it's interesting enough that I have included it in that bench category, or I guess roster category. The bench category is commanders that are just sitting bench, like don't use them. And that's, you know, Edward of Woodstock, El Cid, Thutmose, Amani, and Queen Dido. I just don't think she's a open field commander. So if you were going to be running your open field, I think with 4 marches, this is what you would do. But realistically, most people are just not using that many marches. You're probably just using 1 or 2. And if you're using 1 or 2, I think your best option looks something like this. Yes, this here. This looks nice. Great march speed, great damage, really punchy. That's probably what I would aspire to work toward. I don't have that yet, and I have lots of other archer commanders. And in this last KVK, what did I do? I was using Boudica with either Artemisia or Honda. And then Zhuge Liang, you can pair with Nebu. And that's just really solid, man. 2 pairs. Now, for those of you interested in equipment, let me jump back in game and just talk about this really briefly. There's obviously a lot of great options for archers, and a part of that is because they have an epic set of equipment, which is so powerful. If you're going for the legendary set, it's just really good. The 6-piece bonus is really good. It's 5% of health, and then 3% skill damage at the 4-piece bonus, and 3% attack at the 2-piece bonus. This is a really great set. The other set that could be better than this, if you're really wailing like mad, is you move in on the legendary archer set. You go for the 4-piece bonus over here for the chest, the legs, the gloves, the boots, and then you use crit. That's right. You have to have a crit on the KVK weapon and the KVK helmet. Okay, now I know that's a stretch. I'm not even there yet. If I had prioritized it, I suppose I could be there instead of going for infantry, but I didn't. And this is going to take a long time. And until these are actually crit, my set is, in my opinion, better than the KVK items uncrit. So many people will be looking at this going, bro, that is still so unrelatable. Where do I start? And I will point out that the starting point is very simply the epic set, which is so good. You just make epics, and the epics for archers are actually really good, and you upgrade from your archers to legendaries probably last, and that is because they're the only ones with an epic set, and the others get set bonuses at the legendary tier that they weren't getting at the epic tier. So the revival set here gives you a nice bonus, 3% attack, 3% defense. The epic weapon for archers is great, okay? The golden age gives you archer defense, very solid. It's like 17% when you crit this bad boy. That's great. Great starting point. So the sort of starting point for archers is you stick with your epics. Even the epic boots, by the way, for archers are great. Dude, they give you archer health. Amazing. So you can just stick with epics on the archers for a very, very long time. And, you know, I don't think I need to go all the way back to blues, but they've even got some great blues for archers if you're in the early game, right? You get health on the chest piece. So good. Your general prioritization of stats is going to be health, then defense, then attack for your archers. And the general complaint with archers is that they're just too squishy. So putting the defensive stats on there, that's defense and health, is a huge win. Prioritize the pieces that have that. And along those lines, there is one sort of technical alternative for what a best endgame set could be for archers, and this relies on the new leadership set. So instead of going for the archer boots and instead of going for the archer legs, which are giving you defense and attack, you could instead go for the new leadership pieces and you will get less total stats, which is a problem, but you will instead get troop health. And you also, it's troop health on both, GG. You also get a tiny bit of march speed for archers, which is not the worst. So the 2-piece bonus, by the way, also gives 3% defense. So I was talking with Cortex about this the other day. Big shout out to Cortex, who did the math on this real quick. This trade-off over here, I can tell you the exact math in just a second. If you go with the leadership set and you crit it, okay, you crit these 2 pieces, what you are gaining is 18.5% health and 3% defense from the set bonus. So that's about 21.5% of sort of defensive stats. The overwhelming amount of that is in health. If you go with the archer pieces and you go with that 4-piece bonus that I was showing you in the sort of best set for archers, okay, what do you get instead? Well, the combination of stats from the boots and legs is 14.5% attack. That gives you 10% defense. And that gives you 3% skill damage. Wow. So you're looking at 24.5% of stats instead of 21.5%. Plus, you get 3% skill damage on top. I think it's a very technical play to go for the leadership stuff instead. It might be slightly better, but I don't think it's astronomically better. So if you wanted to do the absolute best min-max set of equipment for archers, I think what that would be is you go over here to this set, you crit the KVK helmet, you crit the KVK weapon, you use the set chest and gloves, crit, of course, and then you go leadership, legs, and boots, crit, and then you might have the min-maxed best set in the game. But for 99% of people and what they're doing, aspiring simply to get the archer set is really good. And because the archer set is so good, I will argue that the KVK weapon and the KVK helmet are very low priority for most people because they're such a small upgrade and they only really become an upgrade when you crit them, as opposed to having just the crit set and the set bonuses, okay? I know that was maybe a long-winded explanation, but I think a pretty complete explanation of the best equipment. So if you found this video helpful, do me the honor of throwing a like on the video. If you're looking for just a more overall guide for what to put in your marches in the open field, I made that video very recently. Card will be in the end screen for the best open field marches for all troop types. And if you're wondering which commanders are the best to invest in the game right now, card will be in the end screen for that video as well, and it does include a comprehensive review of the archers.